And it's my great honor this time to turn things over to Dr. Patterson for further words of introduction and to go on to our first word, relationship.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Welcome, everyone. On the cover of the book, in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a Hebrew word, the word chai, here inside a Jewish star. Chai is the Hebrew word for life, and it has a numerical value of 18, which is where the 18 words to sustain a life comes from. And on the back cover, there's a photograph of me holding my infant granddaughter. And this is a photograph of what the book is about. Okay. The word relationship is fundamental to Jewish thinking, Jewish teaching, fundamental to the inheritance that we receive from our fathers, our forefathers. It's fundamental to the Torah itself. Martin Buber, famous Jewish philosopher, wrote that, the phrase, in the beginning is the relation. He gets that from the opening line of the Torah, which is Bereshit bara. In the beginning, Bereshit bara, created. Nachmanides, one of the major sages of our tradition, who lived in the 13th century and is famous for an ethical will of his own, by the way, he explains that bara, the word for created, is a cognate of the word brit, which is covenant. So the movement of creation is a movement into a covenantal relationship. It's a movement steeped in love. The Zohar, one of the famous, probably the most famous of thousands of Kabbalistic texts, reads this opening line in the Torah, in the Hebrew, Bereshit bara Elokim et ha. In the beginning, God created and then heavens and the earth. It says in the Zohar that in the beginning, God created the Aleph and Tav of et, and added the he, ha, to form ata, which is you. So in the beginning, God created the you, the saying of you, and a movement into a relationship. God himself became a you in this movement. God himself became a who. In other words, someone who speaks, someone who addresses us, someone who hears us. Only where there is a who, a persona, a speaking of a name, a saying of the word you, only where we say you can there be a why. Relationship is the medium of meaning and understanding. Meaning and understanding. The word for understanding, bina, has as its root the word bain, beit nun, which is between. Understanding is between two. Understanding unfolds within a relationship. Indeed, and there's a commentary on the book of Deuteronomy called the Sifrei from around 2,000 years ago. And in the Sifrei, we're told that God says to us, cries out to us, when you are my witnesses, I am God. When you are not my witnesses, I'm not God. God himself needs the relationship in order to be Hashem, in order to have a name. A name is something uttered by another, addressed to someone by another, even the name of God. So how do we express, articulate, affirm our relationship to God here? Is through the human-to-human relationship. So God gives us a Torah in two tablets. Two tablets, not because he can't write small enough to get it onto one, right? But to articulate two distinct but interrelated realms of relationship. We call this, Ben Adam Lamakom, between human and the place. Literally, it's between human and God. And Ben Adam Lechevro, it's between human and fellow human. Each relationship, as I said, is interwoven with the other. You can't have a relation of love and meaning, friendship with a fellow human being without the higher dimension, a dimension of holiness. Nor can you have a relation with the Holy One without the human dimension, without a loving relationship to the human being. That's how you show God your love, is by showing love, being loving toward your fellow human being. And I'll talk about love shortly. But one of the great sages of the Talmud, named Rav, is famous for saying, "Give me friendship or death. I cannot live without friendship." Friendship. It's friendship that enables us, one another, to overcome the solitude of being. No one can know who I am, how I feel, what I'm going through. But my friend knows. My friend, if my friend doesn't know, my friend understands. So relationship is not only about loving one another, it's about understanding one another. Understanding. In this relationship, because human beings are speaking beings, relationship is made of words, at least 18 words, maybe more. And again, in the Zohar has a very interesting teaching about levels of speech. Levels of speech. There's the level called speaking, says the Zohar, which is ledaber, the level of saying, which is lemor, and the level of relating, lehagid. We can speak truths or lies. We can say anything that comes to mind. Sometimes we say things we wish we hadn't said. But it says the Zohar, relating, which is the stuff of a relationship, is something that brings to bear our whole being. And relating here is not just a relation between one person and another, but it also has this sense of relating a tale. Each soul is made of a tale. When God breathes the soul, a living soul, into us, God breathes a tale into us, the tale of Torah. The tale of Torah. It's very striking to me, always has been, that the book of Deuteronomy is part of the Torah. The book of Deuteronomy is the story of the Torah, right? So the story of the Torah is part of the Torah itself. To receive a tale is to become part of the tale. To tell a tale is to expand is to transmit a portion of your soul. I mean, think about this. How do you get to know somebody? You tell your story. You listen to that person's story. What is your story? Tell me your story. Tales are transmitted not just mouth to ear, but mouth to mouth. Those who are created in the image and likeness of the Holy One, the human being, not only speaks, as I write in the book, he or she relates tales, seeking out a relationship through the storytelling, through the tale. And indeed, I mentioned the Sifrei, the commentary on Deuteronomy, where it says, when you are my witnesses, I am God. It's also written in the Sifrei that if you would know the one who created heaven and earth, know the tales, the Agadah, that God himself relates to us. God enters into a relationship with us, not through laws, but through stories and storytelling. Memory is made of storytelling. Memory is made of storytelling. Think of the importance of hearing a tale to your relationship to your mother and father, to your grandparents. Didn't you love hearing their stories? Doesn't that add depth to your relationship with them? Storytelling is one of the most profound expressions of love that we can offer. And I'll talk about love pretty soon. But those are a few of my thoughts from the book about relationship.
Thank you so
Rabbi.
much. And all of this is so profound, indeed. And I loved your references to several things here, in particular, Martin Buber, because Martin Buber certainly spoke of relationship. I had a friend once who sort of encapsulated some of those thoughts about Martin Buber in some short verses. He said that I am not holy. I mean, we're holy. Of course, we all have God's spark, but he said, I'm not holy, you are not holy, but what passes between us is indeed holy. That holiness and meaning within the relationship that we have with another person. And it's not without coincidence that one of the greatest rabbis of the modern period, Rabbi Abraham, the late Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, wrote two books which implied and talked about this nature of the relationship. His first book was titled Man in Search of God. But as you pointed out, that's not complete. It's also the second title you need as well of his other book, God in Search of Man. And it's indeed that it's that partnership, that working partnership that is so essential to what we affirm in Jewish, in our tradition as the vibrancy of our tradition. Think back for one moment at Abraham in the book of Genesis. This is before many other things had happened, but Abraham was pleading to God for the salvation of his city if only 10 righteous people could be found. First it was 50. And the idea was that it would not be fitting for God. He called upon God. He was arguing with God and saying, God, this is not like you in our partnership. We have a partnership of trust and faith and integrity. And that has to go not just between us, it has to extend to the entire world. And so he pleaded, as the best attorney would, for the lives of the citizens, the innocent in Sodom and Gomorrah. And as you all know the story, he bargained from 50 to 40 to 30. But what's most significant about this, about that section of the Bible, that story, that tale, if you will, in my mind, is the rhetorical question that's behind the bargaining. Because that rhetorical question, in my opinion, is the question that echoes out to all of civilization. And that question was written first and composed first in Hebrew. Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat. And you can hear those who even do not understand the Hebrew can understand that there's a sort of there's an inflection to it. And let's say it in English. Will not the judge of all the earth do justice? In other words, they are dialoguing within the relationship. And Abraham is presenting to God that the idea of killing the innocent, there were many guilty, but if there was a certain number, a minimum number of innocent, that idea of slaughtering them was beneath the dignity of their relationship, of that flow between them. And I love also when you say on page 94, indeed talking about the depth of this, that the relating is a tale of calling deep unto deep, of soul unto soul, and of soul unto God. And that certainly makes it as profound as human beings can be. And indeed, if we may, I would conclude my remarks on this section by saying that in the Jewish tradition, we are distinguished from some other traditions that envision divine forces that sometimes inscrutable or even random forces, such as the Greeks. Think of Hercules on the sea, and then talking about the gods, the gods fighting each other and causing a storm. Ours is a relationship, an intimate one, based on true and tried principles. And I like where you point out, because of that intimacy, he said, no one ever cried out, Father, to the Aristotelian first principle, that principle that says that was the very first one, and that was the beginning of God. Nor did other people talk about that very first unmoved mover that was responsible for everything else that moves in the universe. But that's academic. It's not an intimacy. That's a mental conclusion, sort of a mental gymnastic. And I think what's so beautiful about the way you constructed this chapter is you're truly talking about the great depth of all the range of soul into soul, and great depths of who we can be as people, and who we can call upon, and sort of the calling even upon God for the depth, rather than just one aspect of rational analysis.
Thank you. Well, transcending the rational is, it's not the emotional, but the loving.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which brings me to love. And the relationship is made of love. When God cried out, "Where are you?" to Adam, he cries, as I've touched on in the past, I think, ayeka, which is a cry of anguish. It's not "where are you?" It's "how could you? What have you done?" It's a cry of pain and anguish. God is suffering. The infinite one who loves infinitely suffers infinitely. Because Adam has turned away, has hidden from him, has lost a relationship with him. That's the source of anguish. The angels tried to talk God out of it when according to the Midrash, when he set out, "I'm going to create heaven and earth and humanity." Don't do it. It's going to hurt you. Because it's an act of love. It's similar, not the same, but similar to saying don't have children because they're going to break your heart. Sure enough. But love isn't something that comes naturally. Love is supernatural. That's why it's commanded. We are commanded to love God with all of our soul, because our soul is made of love. The commandment is an expression of love. Commandment, mitzvah. You've heard, most of us know have heard the phrase, doing a mitzvah, doing a good deed. Mitzvah actually means commanded or commandment, and the root of commandment often means connection. The commandment consists of a loving connection. It's not a rule that we follow or an order that we obey. So we are commanded to love with all of our soul. The soul is made of love. Love is not a feeling. Feelings we have inside of us, but love is between two. Feelings are strung along the thread of love. With love comes all sorts of feelings, right? Tenderness, anger, frustration, compassion. Love is a living presence. Now, as usual, when I discuss the English word love, I turn to the Hebrew word ahava in this book. Ahava has as a root hav, which means to give. Love is not a feeling. Love is an act of giving. Giving your time, giving your attention, even giving your life. The one whom we love is one for whom we would die joyfully. Joyfully. So it's to give. And in the commandment, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. This is a commandment, according to the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, that contains all of the Torah. All of the Torah is couched in this commandment. And the phrase, the word kamocha, translated as yourself, is not exactly the best translation. And also the phrase la re'echa, la re'echa, it's toward your neighbor. It's not love your neighbor, it's be loving toward your neighbor. Komocha is what you are like. That is who you are. You are the loving relationship to your fellow human being, to your neighbor, to your neighbor. So you should be loving toward your neighbor, because it's in that act of loving that the soul draws its breath. Life and love are not diminished by this giving, but increased. Increased. Love is not a commodity that dwindles away as you give it away. The more you give, the brighter the soul burns, like a star emanating light. A star that gives out light has light. A star that holds light in is a black hole, as it is with the soul. Even more extraordinary in the Torah is the commandment to love the stranger, kamocha, as yourself. Love your neighbor is in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. Love the stranger, same words, except the stranger, ger, is in the place of the neighbor, as Leviticus 19:34. What's extraordinary about this commandment concerning the stranger, love the stranger, care for the stranger, be considerate to the stranger, be kind, it appears 36 times. Twice the value of 18, 2 times chai, 2 times life. This is perhaps even more critical than loving the neighbor. Now, Primo Levi, whom some of you know very well, says in his book Survival in Auschwitz that the stranger is often viewed as an enemy, or viewed with suspicion, hostility, hesitation, and so on. Most of us have these feelings about the stranger, but he says when this becomes a premise or a principle in an ideology, a syllogistic way of thinking, at the end of the syllogism is the lager, the camp. Without this love for the one who seems weird to us, and when we adopt that as a principle, we end up with murder, mass murder. We end up justifying mass murder. This orientation toward the other human being is toward every other human being in Jewish tradition. As I've discussed before, every human being is a child of Adam. We're all related. There's only one side of the family. The stranger is not so strange. The strangest one, who is other than we are, I would suggest, is God. God is very strange. I mean, never mind someone who doesn't look like me, has this weird accent, talks funny, dresses funny, God forbid, belongs to a different political party, different religion, whatever. Not me, not me, not me. But that's all the more reason to love the soul, the human being, and the stranger. Without that love, we have no life. We have no life. So some thoughts on love.
Thank you so much. And each one of those is so profound. I sort of continuing with one of the last thoughts that you uttered there, I'd like to talk about that in the context of your book here a little bit more, because it's really, in many ways, a bold statement to say that no other is stranger than God. It's a bold statement. And it takes courage to say that, and yet there's such wisdom in it. And as I'm going to attempt to show in the next few minutes here, it's also the root of spiritual humility, which you talk about, and you echo that theme a couple pages later in your work. And so, for those who are following the book in your readings, on page 101 in the middle, it's a very bold statement, saying that no others is stranger than God, to approach the living God, to come before the living God, to fall in the hands of the living God, is to have our every preconception about God, everything that we had presumed to know about him, undone. And God is strange, you say, because God's love for us surpasses all that is familiar to us, all thought, all reason, all rumination. There's a lot of profundity in that. So in the previous chapter, in the relationship, we talked about, or you mentioned, the bond between a mother and a child. And the mammalian kindian, there is no other stronger bond. And for most of us in our lives who are fortunate to have wonderful parental, very good, healthy parental relationships, then we can feel a sense of gratitude for that. However, even beyond that, not every parental, one could perhaps say no relationship in the human realm is perfect. But that's why we contrast it with the great love of God, Ava Rabbah. God's love is so much above and beyond anything that we have experienced, because it emanates from God. And we, out of by definition, are not able to encompass everything that God is. And so this leads to then a base for spiritual humility. And therefore, several pages later on, you say, that anyone who would presume to determine, in the context of redemption, who is redeemed and who is damned, is one who succumbs to the idolatrous worship of the illusory ego. And then you say, what's not beyond our reckoning is the need, the person in front of us who's suffering from hunger or some other measure of suffering. But you say, if we determine that our fellow being has no place with God due to his or her unbelief in a certain area, we can't have a relationship with that person. We're blocked off. And that's very, let's say that's foreign to the essence of the Jewish tradition, in which we say every person, including non-Jews, can have a place in the world to come. And so, most notably, I think it's so significant. At the bottom of page 104, again for our readers, you say, Judaism does not paint itself into the theological corner of declaring that the path to God leads only through Judaism. In other words, it's sort of like the Do principle. You have Judo, Kendo, Aikido, all different ways, paths. And we see that our path, we maintain that our path is the best for us, but we don't impose it upon penalty of death for anyone else. And that is a very real dialogue that we've talked about even previously in our sessions. And then back on page 101, you have a very, again, a very bold statement when you talk about ethics and its relationship to love. And when I read it, I thought, wow, so your statement here is that ethics has nothing to do with categorical imperatives or philosophical deductions, and everything to do with loving, especially when loving comes hardest. And when I read that, I thought, wow, that's bold. And I was reminded of, this dates me, I know. But for those of you many decades ago, you'll remember there was a song once by the Chipmunks. It was called the Rubber Dam. Oops, there goes another rubber tree dam. Basically, high hopes. You can do anything. So as I read that, I said, oops, there goes another rubber tree dam. In what context do I mean that? In one sentence, in half a sentence, you said goodbye, dismissed hundreds of pages of Immanuel Kant. who I struggled with very, very diligently in high school as a philosophy student in high school, in a wonderful program that I even talked about. It was a 3-hour concentrated program. I was very fortunate to experience it, exploring Western civilization from the ancient Greeks to the modern period. Hundreds of pages of Immanuel Kant, who tried to work it out intellectually, through philosophical determination, determined that there is a type of moral imperative outside of God. And he took several hundred pages to do it. Or philosophical deductions. We're talking about the Aristotelian ethics, and hundreds of pages of dialogues of Plato and Aristotle. And here it's very simple, but profound. It's relationship with God. So I wanted to point those things out and wonder if you have any further comments on those. I know it's a lot, but I think it's all very profound.
Well, just one brief comment. One of the Jewish thinkers who was most renowned for his thinking about ethics is Emmanuel Levinas, who invokes what he calls the wisdom of love in contrast to the love of wisdom. Philosophy, philosophia, is love of wisdom. The tradition that you just mentioned, going back from Aristotle all the way through the Enlightenment, Levinas says, no, what human life, human thinking about ethics, good and evil, moral standing, is not about the love of wisdom, but it's about the wisdom of love. Love makes us wise. Love opens our eyes to what there is to hold dear and enables us to realize that there's nothing more fragile than what is most precious. Okay. There are moments in our lives when we have that wisdom of love, but there are always moments that are tied to loved ones, people with whom we are very close, either new people who are born into the world, the little one we hold in our hands, or the one whom we lay into the earth. Those are moments when the wisdom of love opens up to us. And there are moments for which we are grateful. If I can transition into gratitude. Gratitude is the key to any sense of well-being. I won't say happiness. Happiness is kind of an overused word. Jews begin their morning saying thank you. Modéani, first words. Not words of Torah, not God, invoking God. It's Modéani lifanecha. I give thanks before you. We don't say God. We say the you of the relationship. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says we don't say God's name because gratitude transcends even the name of the Holy One. And we don't, what are we thanking God for exactly? We say, we thank God for returning our soul to this realm. When we sleep, the soul ascends into other realms, upper realms. And when God returns our soul to us and we awaken once more with the blessing of beginning again, we thank God and we affirm to God, Rabbi imunatecha, great is your faith in me. I've messed up every day, and yet here I am again. You're sending me on another mission. The infinite one who loves infinitely is infinitely patient. So it's not thanking God for another day to enjoy life, but to rejoice in life and to have a mission in life, to have a reason to get out of bed. to go be sent on another assignment. When God awakens us, it's because God has something for us to do that day, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, and so on. Cycles of time are made of the missions that God sends us on. There is a teaching that tells us that the entire Torah, from beginning to end, written as one word, is one of the names of God. The Torah itself is made of thanksgiving. It's made of gratitude. It has occurred to me that if Torah, all of the Torah is one of God's names, maybe Modeh Ani is one of God's names. Maybe God is saying to me, thank you. Maybe. Indeed, but thanksgiving is central. Gratitude is central to Jewish teaching, Jewish prayers. We begin the morning with the prayer, Modeh Ani. We begin the morning prayer service with a hodu, which means praise or thanksgiving. The longest part of the 18 benedictions, the center of the liturgy, is Modim Anachnu. We give thanks to you. It's the longest part of that. And it's a gratitude that we ascend to before we know what there is to be grateful for. Gratitude is most essential when it comes before you see what there is to be grateful for. There's a Hasidic saying that tells us in all the world, there's one place, only one place where a great treasure is hidden. And that place is the spot where you're standing. But how can we behold it? It's through eyes filled with gratitude that the scales fall from our eyes and we can behold what is infinitely precious lying at our feet, sitting in our lap, hugging us around the neck. Gratitude is an optics. We thank God for opening our eyes to realize, to behold what there is to be thankful for. We thank God for gratitude itself. One of the great Hasidic masters, known as Rabbi Baruch, once said that what would we be without gratitude? He says, we would be utterly bereft of life and meaning, of purpose and direction, left to languish in horror, hanging by our heels over the abyss of nothingness and nihilism, which is all around us. It's all around us. One last thought with regard to gratitude and prayer. The oldest psalm, according to our tradition, Psalm 92, which is a song for the Sabbath day. And according to Jewish tradition, it was written by Adam. When the sun went down on the sixth day, and God ushered in the Sabbath, it says, the Midrash says that when Adam grew afraid, God lit a fire for him, a light for him. And notice this difference. He's in the Greek mythical tradition, fire is stolen from the gods, right? Prometheus. Here, fire is a gift from God. It's a gift of light, so that Adam would not be afraid. The first song to come from the lips of the first human being, we are taught, is a song of thanksgiving, a song of gratitude. As we're taught in the 100th Psalm, Psalm 100, the only way we can draw close to God is through rejoicing and thanksgiving. That's where the avenue, the approach, the nearness to God lies. The name of the Jew, The word Jew, Yehudi, means one who is grateful. You can't be a Jew without gratitude. And I would add, you can't be a human being without gratitude. Human being. Some thoughts on gratitude.
Thank you. Absolutely profound. And I really want to thank you indeed for talking so much in your book and in your remarks right now about that first prayer that we do say in the morning. Modeh ani lefanecha. That we thank God. And I felt it always, but I didn't consciously ruminate on the reversal of the word order, which you point out at the bottom of page 112. Normally you have subject first. This is the verb first. So I made a few thoughts on that here, that in essence, we become a verb. We become a person of action. The action itself is the gratitude that we feel at that instant in our first recognition of coming to consciousness and the awareness of who we are and what human destiny is and what our possibilities are in relationship. Again, relationship to God come from that awareness. And you talk about that, the hakarat todah, the awareness of the gratitude itself. So, and therefore, instead of saying, I'm thankful, thankful am I, is the way that I came to understand that the thankfulness permeates our whole essence and indeed influences the I or the identity. And as you point out, there's no I without that recognition of that beyond us. So the gratitude describes our essence. And I noted, if emoted successfully from the depths of our being, indeed, it seems to me that it becomes the essence of our essence. And I thought you'd
That's
like that
good.
one.
Yeah, I do like that.
Yes. Now, also very, very boldly in your book here, and I think importantly, so importantly for our day and age, you refer in the middle of page 112 to just like there was a book written, Escape from Freedom, there can be an escape from gratitude and an escape from responsibility. And indeed, when we escape, when we try and go out of that feeling and that modality of gratitude, we become less as human beings. And it's very tempting in there, and it's very understandable if we don't have those anchors, how the spirit of victimhood can set in. And so you say the why me of victimhood eclipses the here I am of gratitude. Here I am, I'm ready to serve God. And it puts one in a situation where that can lead to even violence. You profoundly ask here, apropos to our times, I'm thinking of the events of the summer of 2020. I'm thinking of modern things on the streets. I'm thinking of the events of the subway. I'm thinking of all kinds of things beyond partisan ramifications. These are ultimate ramifications, I think, of the nature of being human. So you say, can anyone whose life is steeped in gratitude engage in looting, burning, or otherwise harming others? No. Gratitude is the opposite of vengeance, which always arises from feeling cheated. No one who is grateful feels cheated. It's like two things at the same time that are incompatible. If you're feeling grateful, you're feeling full. What is grateful? You are full of the feeling of thankfulness. It fills your cup. And so you're not focused on the cup being half empty or who has the bigger cup, who has more in their cup, because full is full. And if your cup is full, you can't have it more full than full. And that's so profound and I think so important for our age. And if everyone in the country would just read this one paragraph, I don't care what party they are, the world would be a lot better place.
I appreciate that. Very well said.
Thank you.
Well said. Should we take some questions?
Okay.
We have 10, 15 minutes, maybe.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. We as Jews have always encouraged questions. So I'm going to fill in here just a little bit while we're waiting for the questions to appear in our hands. Paramount to that, in my viewpoint here, is of course after Purim here, celebrating a survival and victory over enemies, is the holiday of Passover. And what do we encourage our young people to do? To ask questions. And I think that sometimes, as I pointed out the other day, actually in a Friday night sermon, a great expert on, thank you so much, on linguistics, the great late master of literature, symbolic symbols and symbolism, the great late Susan K. Langer, noted once that the nature of the question sometimes can even presuppose the answer. So as we have questions here, we'll think about that. So, very nice. This is good. Some people, the question says, are not lovable. However, we can show them respect because they are children of God. Love can equal with respect. Do you agree? Do you agree? Love, or do you agree that love is a deep emotion? I think maybe I can parse this. Do you agree with that notion? In other words, substituting respect for love, even if you can't love the person, and noting that love is a deep emotion.
Yes, we're not commanded to have a certain feeling. We're commanded to treat people in a certain manner, just to be loving toward, show loving kindness toward, especially when you don't feel like it. That's why we're commanded. If it's when I feel like it, I don't need the commandment, right? To feel in a certain manner. It's when I'd rather not. It's when I'm dealing with someone who is a pain that I have to be kind, considerate. It's all the more crucial. It's all the more crucial. And often, at least in my experience, treating someone with kindness can encourage kindness on the part of that person as well. So it's treating, being loving toward, not, it's not about feelings.
Okay, great. And here is a sort of let's say a challenging thought from a different perspective, but I know I have a feeling that you'll love answering this as well. Many brilliant-minded people tend to isolate themselves. From that isolation comes creative thought. So their relationship may well be their creativity, going, quote, into the desert to think. That's the first part of that.
Yes. Look, the Jewish tradition, Hasidic tradition, which is about loving relationship, Jewish tradition in general, Hasidic tradition in particular, doesn't forbid retreat. The Hasidic masters are known for retreating into the forest. But what's the purpose of the retreat? The purpose is to return with a greater capacity, with a renewed capacity for the relationship. And we all know this. Those of us, everyone here knows this. Learning, the process of learning can only go so far in isolation. You need interaction with another to take your learning to another level, your understanding, your brilliance to another level. So we don't, in Jewish tradition, we don't so much learn from as learn with someone. Learning happens in pairs. Learning happens in pairs. We have the yeshiva has, in the yeshiva, they have study partners, right? It's learning is about interaction. But so the isolation, yes, to clear your head, focus, meditate, concentrate, but to what end? for the sake of a return to an engagement that in which you can ascend even higher.
Exactly. And if I just may add, the ideal in the Jewish tradition is not the ideal only of a monk and as it were, and going out individually and staying on a rock and meditating for the whole life.
Right.
It's to come back into society with the gifts of that creativity, share it, and make that one step more, one further link in solidifying and enacting our mission statement. And as I shared in my class tonight, I know that we have two people there who it's right in the center of their minds, but I won't ask them because it's on the Zoom format here. But what is the Jewish rhetorically? What is the Jewish mission statement? Very clearly said in one sentence, found in the second paragraph of the Aleinu prayer. First in Hebrew, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to make the world a better place. What we call in Hebrew, tikkun olam, the repair of the world. So very much, they're not, being alone in the desert is not contradictory to being a good person. It's just not everything. Right?
Right.
So here's a question coming from a deeply psychological perspective and a human one as well. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. What if you don't love yourself? How can you love another?
Who do you hug when you love yourself? To whom do you give a gift? To whom do you offer a kind word? You stand in front of the mirror. Oh man, I have so much respect for you. I love you so much. You're so wonderful. What's that? I know it's common wisdom in some circles that you can never love somebody else unless you love yourself first. I think that's backwards. In fact, love entails a forgetfulness of oneself. A forgetfulness of oneself. If you talk to the righteous among Gentiles who saved Jews during the war, and if you ask them, why did you do it? They're puzzled by the question. What do you mean? Why did I do it? Weren't you afraid? I didn't think about that. All I could think about was what had to be done. The love doesn't calculate in the dative case. In other words, love doesn't calculate what's going to happen to me and what's in it for me. Me. There's no me where love is concerned. So I don't know what loving oneself looks like. Now, self-confidence, self-respect, sense of calling. Yeah. I'm summoned. Yes, I am summoned for this task, for this relationship. If God summons me, I can do it. I have confidence that I can do it with God's help. So yes, and I'm doing what I think is best in my own judgment. All of this, I can see, I understand, but I'm not sure what self-love looks like exactly. It's frankly never made much sense to me.
Thank you. And the next question is almost in diagram form. I'll show it to you. So it has love, the words love and reward going back and forth with an arrow toward each, and then saying exclamation point, and then a question. I'll let you interpret it first. I have some thoughts on it, but go ahead.
Well, no one loves another for a reward. Love is not a business transaction. There's a story of one of the sages in the Talmud.
We can't hear you.
Capacity. Capacity.
Okay, so that our listening audience can understand what just happened, we'll ask you to refrain from your questions though, because we can't, we can't dialogue too much back and forth because we have to translate it for our viewing audience. The question, but so it was noted here that capacity is an essential component of this. I think if I could do
Well,
justice to
and
that.
not everyone has a capacity for love. Yes, yes. But not everyone is in a mental state that is conducive to that. I mean, people have real psychological problems. Sure. And those are people entrusted to our care. They're not less human. Look, love doesn't judge who deserves this or deserves that, who should be rewarded this or rewarded that. Love sees the need and meets the need, even among those who are incapacitated, maybe especially among those who are incapacitated. But for those of us who do have a capacity, we also have a responsibility. Love understands itself not to have done enough. It's Schindler at the end of Schindler's List. Why did I keep the car? I didn't do enough? I should have done more, more, more. Love wants to give more, not to have more. Love wants to become more. Love is more for another, wants to impart more. If I take on a greater capacity, it's a greater capacity to give. You know, I tell my students are here, some of them, and on occasion we have a brief discussion about education. What's it for? What is it? What's it about? It's not about what most college recruiters tell you it's about. Most of the recruiters will come to you and say, "Come to our school, and you'll have a greater capacity for plundering the world of its goods." That's not education. The Hebrew word for education, chinuch, means sanctification. Okay? It's taking on, education is about taking on a greater and more and deeper capacity for sanctifying the world around us, which lies in loving, giving, helping, gratitude, and so on. That's what you are trying to acquire when you acquire an education, is a greater capacity for love, simply said.
Thank you. And I would add also, when we think of reward in connection with love, we are, because just naturally being human, we may then tend to think conditionally. Well, if I do this for this person, or if I do this action, then I'll get this reward. And the rabbis are very clear to teach us that something that if a gesture is done on the basis of a condition, it's not true love. It might be a good transaction. It might be a selfish based or a wise, or I'd say prudent transaction, but it's not real love. Love gives without the expectation of reward. And so therefore, in the Jewish tradition, if you were to examine the question of what would be considered the highest category of deeds, if you were to sort of try and have a paradigm of what the highest category of deeds would be, at least our tradition is very firm in saying that that group of category could be described as gemilut chasadim. And I often translate as that righteous loving kindness. And it's the way I describe it, the paradigm is something that you do on behalf of someone else for which you absolutely do not expect any reward. In some cases, you're not able to receive an award from the person. Example, you referred to burial. When you perform an act of burial for someone or preparing someone for burial, obviously the person has passed away. They can no longer give anything to you other than their physical presence that you still see. However, you still might get a reward, but it's such a kind of tangential reward, and but I guess tangential in the sense here, not conditional, but it comes by virtue of doing the deed itself. And the rabbis have a title for that. They call that the simcha shel mitzvah, the happiness from the mitzvah itself, from doing the act. It's in its own inherent reward. You do it for the sake of itself. And that's the highest level, one of the highest levels that we are of mitzvah, commandment, that we're able to engage in as human beings, I think, as envisioned by our rabbis. Moving on. There was a question that came from page 102. The effort to convert the stranger or to save his soul or to make him to submit to my ideology, ... And then the question follows, is this to mean that if we offer help, aid, or compassion to a stranger, we should not offer a prayer or guidance of safety so as not to appear as if we are converting them?
A prayer of guidance or safety. Yes, Jews pray for strangers all the time. Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, is about prayers for the nations. I think in ancient times, it's the only group of people I know of who brought sacrifices and prayers for the well-being and prosperity of all the other nations, the strangers in the world. The story of Abraham tells us our calling, our commandment, with regard to the stranger. When he sees 3 strangers approaching his tent, he rushes out to meet them, brings them into his tent, has food prepared for them, washes their feet. He doesn't ask them their business. Where are you from? What are you up to? Who are you going to vote for in the next election? He's not interested. He's interested in their comfort and feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty. That's our obligation. Let God worry about the soul. Beware of those who are out to save your soul. Do we have time for just maybe one more?
Surely, just a couple more short ones here.
Okay.
And that's exactly true. You can pray for someone, and pray for their well-being. It doesn't mean that you're trying to determine for them what should be inside their soul or what God has for them.
You pray that they may have enough to eat.
Yeah. Now this is a very let's call it could be a provocative question. Let's see how you'll answer it. Can you please tell us how to differentiate between, I'm going to insert the word between, a stranger from an intruder?
The stranger comes for a helping hand. The intruder comes for your head. It's very simple. Loving the stranger doesn't mean allowing the stranger to harm you. That's not showing love. Preventing the stranger from harming you is showing love to the stranger. Okay? So this is not about letting people walk all over you. You do them no favors. As I said to one of my students who has children, do you let your 8-year-old hit you? Of course not. It's bad for the 8-year-old to let him or her hit you. Right?
Exactly.
Last question.
Blood is thicker than water. Is this a Jewish value?
Yes. The soul is in the blood. Life is in the water. I mean, we do have these ways of thinking. But you can help you can help those whom you know the best. You can help those whose needs you are most familiar with. You can help those who are closest to you as a way, and one of the ways we help them is to teach them to help others, right? To teach them about tzedakah. Have a tzedakah box, a charity box in your home. Give tzedakah. Let your children see you give tzedakah, give charity when you pray. Let your children see you treating others with kindness. They're the first ones whom you will teach and the ones you have the greatest impact on. So in that sense, yes, blood is thicker than water. But it's in that relation, the parental relation, the marriage relation, that relationship informs all of our other relationships. Where the family falls apart, the community falls apart. Where marriage falls apart, where in communities where the fathers are nowhere to be found, those are communities in utter disarray for a reason. So yes, the family is crucial, not just to the family members, but to everyone around us, everyone in our community. Their lives are at stake and the integrity of each of our families. So yeah, that's where you start with your loving kindness, with your teaching, understanding your responsibility for your children and what's been entrusted to your care through your children. For me, informs, enlightens my understanding of my students who are like my children, entrusted to my care. So it's, it informs your view of everything. The closeness of your family informs how you see and understand everything else.
Thank you so much.